Hey, welcome to the Healthy Postnatal Buddy podcast with your postnatal expert, Peter Lapp. That, as always, would be me. Today I'm talking about running as postpartum exercise, why it's not the best idea in the world, why it's actually a pretty terrible idea to start there. And I talk briefly about my pet peeve to do with the NHS website and diastasis recti, how remarkably bad their advice is and how they're full of it when they say things like the separation between your stomach muscles will usually go back to normal by the time your baby is 8 weeks old. What can the NHS do to finally improve a bit on its care for postpartum women? I promise it'll be more fun than it sounds, right? Okay, here we go. Hey, welcome to the Healthy Postnatal Body podcast. This is a podcast for the 17th of July, 2022. And it's toasty. It's toasty already. I'm not liking it much. I've got Kitty lying here on the bed, completely zonked out and swelteringly warm. Lola and Buddy are also pottering about here, so the door had to stay open. So it'll be a bit more echoey. Sound quality will be even worse than usual. No, I'll do my best to bring it back to a normal level in a little bit. It is one of those days. It's going to be even warmer tomorrow and the day after. It's not right. It's not right, people. I'm not having it and I'm not enjoying it. I've also got a bit of a cold, so, my voice will sound wonky as well. Like I said, it's a podcast for the 17th of July. And what am I talking about today? I'm talking about running postpartum. I was reminded this week, I saw someone out and about running who'd given birth 8 weeks ago. They were out and about running and they saw me walking the dogs. They were running around the nature reserve where I usually walk. I was walking the dogs and then they stopped and talked to me. And, they were told that running would be good for them at the 6 weeks postpartum stage because that's what their doctor had told them. But they didn't really feel comfortable. So I had to talk her through why running postpartum is, generally speaking, a terrible idea. Walking postpartum is one thing. Running postpartum is horrific. Basically, what happens, and I know some of you will have heard me say this before, when you're early postpartum, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, for a lot of people even up to 6 months, your pelvic floor and your core is nowhere near strong enough to support running as impact exercise. The pressure on your core is significant to such an extent that it could well make diastasis recti slightly worse. It definitely doesn't help heal diastasis recti. And what happens for a lot of runners, I don't know if you've ever seen any distance runners, marathon runners and all that sort of stuff, is they're all hunched over. Amateur runners, not the professionals. The professionals seem to be much better in their posture. But they're all hunched over and all slouched, so their core is completely disengaged, which makes things like diastasis recti or a weak core, which makes that much worse. Because now you're just teaching your body not to engage the core when you're exercising, which is when you need it the most. And that's what she was doing. Her posture was horrific. There was no core activation, and she had a tremendous amount of bounce happening, so her pelvic floor was under a tremendous amount of pressure. All that put together just spells trouble and just spells doing the opposite, just is doing the opposite of what you actually want to do. So what you want to do postpartum, I've said this before, you start with your pelvic floor exercises. Before you go running, you have to train your pelvic floor. You have to make sure everything works well enough again, so that your pelvic floor can sustain the pressure of you going for a jog. And the way to do that is by, first of all, seeing a pelvic health physio or getting a mummy MOT or whatever they call it. If you can afford to get one, then definitely pay for it. I would argue that you should always pay for one. The NHS is pretty bad when it comes to this stuff. on the waiting lists on the NHS, if they even have a pelvic health specialist, not a normal physio that also does pelvic health, but a specialist. You need people to know what they're talking about. Like an ear, nose and throat doctor, you don't go to see them when you have a broken leg. You need to really go to the right specialist for the job. It was a terrible example, by the way, but I hope you know what I mean. So you go and see a pelvic floor specialist, and they will give you a checkup and they'll give you some exercises to do, and then you know how to do your Kegel exercises or how to do your specific pelvic floor exercises, including the core breath and all that sort of stuff. And you strengthen the pelvic floor up, and then you can go for a run. Now, for diastasis recti, I've said it before, diastasis recti is caused by too much internal pressure on the core muscles, right? And that's fundamentally what causes it. And it could well be pregnancy, it could well be, I don't know, a bare belly, overall, a genetic weakness, poor breathing, all that sort of stuff. Doesn't really matter. But impact exercise is one of those things that causes diastasis recti. As if you look at diastasis recti as an injury, which we should. So you want to make sure when you go for a run, if you still have diastasis recti, first of all, you can only really go for a run if you have diastasis recti, if you at least have good core activation. And I always talk about how core activation is an important part of diastasis recti. So basically, you should have core activation, but you might still have a gap that is slightly larger than what it would usually be, right? If that is the case, then you can go for a light jog well enough. Doesn't mean you can go for a sprint competition. And it doesn't mean that you can do like box jumps and all that sort of stuff, right? Slowly catchy monkey and all that sort of thing. If you have all that and your breathing is under control, you know how to engage your core, then you can start to go for a run. You can't do it the other way around. You can't learn how to activate the core and how to activate your pelvic floor, strengthen up your pelvic floor by going for a run. That is not what running does. You can't learn. It's not like, say you have some pelvic floor weakness after 6-8 weeks postpartum. It's quite normal. It's quite common, right? It's not right and it needs to be fixed, but it's quite common to have it for a few months postpartum. You can't say, well, if I practice running with a weak pelvic floor, then my pelvic floor will learn to strengthen up. That is the opposite way of how it works. It actually just makes it worse. So just be careful with that. And when people tell you that it's okay to go for a run to, air quotes, lose that baby weight or something remarkably stupid like that, just laugh at them and walk away. Please just say, no, you don't know what you're talking about. Now, the interview I did with Jessica Marie Rose Leggio a while ago about postpartum running, and I will link to that in the podcast description as well. That is what we're talking about. Basically, bringing your fitness levels back, making sure everything works properly before you go all out running again. Now, she's a running coach, right? That is what she does. But she doesn't have people start running and then strengthen up their pelvic floor. It's the other way around. Or in her case, it's a lot of psoas activation and all that sort of stuff. So please don't, it's just don't run as your main form of postpartum exercise. Now, of course, people will then say, okay, what can I do for my cardio? Well, you can jump on a bike. If that's more comfortable for you, at least it takes the impact element of it. Same for the cross away from it. Same for cross trainer, same for swimming, all that sort of stuff. Just remember that those things also don't do anything for your core unless you do specific core exercises or pelvic floor exercises. Sitting on a bike, you still have to breathe your way through it. It's very tempting for people to go and do spin classes or something like that postpartum. And then when it gets to the climbing bit, they start to hold their breath and they start to push through. Remember that if you have diastasis recti or a weak pelvic floor, which you will do, that you want to make sure there isn't too much pressure on the pelvic floor or core when you exercise. And that means not doing anything too intense and breathing your way through it. Always, always, always breathe your way through exercise. Because if you don't, you're making the problem worse. And that goes for swimming, cross-trainer, and cycling all alike, or lifting heavy things and all that sort of thing all alike. But we don't exercise to lose the baby weight, right? That is just such a remarkably inefficient way of doing anything. And it also really shouldn't be the focus. Which brings me to one of my pet peeves about the NHS website. Because I looked at the NHS website to see if they'd finally updated their shitty information. I check it out every now and again. And the answer is, of course, no. Because the NHS, when it comes to postpartum care, postpartum advice, it's terrible. It is outrageously bad. I have never come across any organization that is a health organization that is as terrible as the NHS is when it comes to dealing with postpartum women. And I've dealt with dodgy, slim, fast-selling personal trainers. Those guys will give better advice than the NHS does. It is outrageously bad. It is stonkingly bad. I would love to speak to anyone in the NHS that is at a level that they can put information out there. Because really, you suck at your job. I mean, it is just outrageous. Things that we're talking about, things like, where is it? Your pelvic, what is it? Your post-pregnancy body, right? So basically they're saying having a baby changes your body. Here's some advice to help you feel comfortable with your body. Yeah. So they say there may be physical problems. I'll just go for the website. There may be physical problems after having a baby. They can be related to pregnancy or birth or the things you do whilst caring for your children, such as lifting and bending. For some problems, you can do a lot to help yourself. Yeah, for almost everything. For example, if you have a leaky bladder or incontinence or a heavy feeling between your vagina and anus, you might need to strengthen the muscles around your bladder by doing pelvic floor exercises. Okay, awesome. Also, if you have back pain, you may need to learn how to look after your back and do some exercises to strengthen it. Why can't you give us those exercises, you jackasses, right? If you have back pain, go deal with it. And I've said this before, postpartum back pain is not back pain that is usually caused by the back, right? So then they say you may need to learn how to look after your back, or your GP, or at least your healthcare professional should be able to tell you this. Do some exercises to strengthen it. No, because your problems are usually not caused by your back. If a physical problem is bothering you, ask your GP or health visitor for help at any time. They can advise you, and the GP can refer you to a specialist if necessary. And it almost always is, right? Your GP is a referral station. You don't see those guys for advice. You go see them and you say, send me in the right direction. Right? Your postnatal check at around 6 to 8 weeks after the birth of your baby is a good time to talk to the GP about any physical or mental health problems you've had since birth. Agree. Right, and now we get to the bad bit. Separated stomach muscles. It is common for the two muscles that run down the middle of your stomach to separate during pregnancy. This is called diastasis recti or divarication. The amount of separation can vary. It happens because your growing womb, uterus, pushes the muscles apart, making them longer and weaker. The separation between your stomach muscles will usually go back to normal by the time your baby is 8 weeks old. Horse manure. Because I'm trying to keep this podcast relatively clean, right? That's it. No, that is not true. And I've posted the studies to show that that is not usually go back at all. After 8 weeks, when it was 77% still have it. After a year, a third of women still have it. So it doesn't usually go back to normal by the time your baby's 8 weeks old. After 6 months, most women postpartum still have diastasis recti. Right? So that's wrong. After you've had your baby, you can check the size of separation with this simple technique. And then there isn't even a video. They're just talking about how to measure the diastasis recti, but they don't even see They don't even tell you where to place the fingers and all that sort of stuff. Place the fingers side by side and all that sort of thing. So that's pretty bad. There isn't, like I said, there isn't even a video on this on the website. It's outrageous. Right? If the gap is still obvious 8 weeks after the birth, contact a GP as you may be at risk of back problems. The GP can refer you to a physiotherapist who will give you some specific exercises to do. A couple of things here. The gap still is obvious 8 weeks after birth. That is completely normal, right? Don't worry about it. It's not some magic. Like I said, most people don't have, most people still have diastasis recti 8 weeks postpartum. Their muscles don't go back to usual position. Contact your GP as you may be at risk of back problems. Yeah, and other problems, you jackasses. Your core isn't functioning the way it should. Right? It is such a sloppy sentence. We have to kind of get away from this. That the core does more than just support your back. Diastasis recti causes significantly more problems than just your back. Quite often pelvic floor problems are related to diastasis recti as well. Right? Posture problems, neck problems, all that sort of stuff, hip pain, all that sort of thing is linked to your core not functioning the way it should, and diastasis recti is, of course, part of that. The GP can refer you to a physiotherapist. I hope it's a specialist physio. Like I said, don't see anyone that's not a specialist on this. Regular pelvic floor and deep stomach muscles can help to reduce. I'm going back to the text. Regular pelvic floor and deep stomach muscle exercises can help to reduce the size of separation between your stomach muscles. It's also important to stand up tall and be aware of your posture. Right. Stomach exercise. Because I'll skip the pelvic floor bit. Because the pelvic floor is just talking to you for how to do a Kegel exercise. Stomach exercise. This exercise can help you tone your stomach muscles. No, it can't. I'm sorry if that was a bit louder. It doesn't. Right, step one, lie on your side with your knees slightly bent. Okay, why am I lying on my side? Right, and which side am I lying on? 2, let your tummy relax and breathe in gently. 3, as you breathe out, gently draw in the lower part of your stomach like a corset, narrowing your waistline. Yeah, but why am I on my side? 4, squeeze your pelvic floor muscles at the same time. 5, hold for a count of 10, breathing normally, and then gently release. Repeat up to 10 times. Now, as I say in the podcast description, this is a really shitty core breath that they're doing. Lie on your side with your knees slightly bent. No, you lie on your back when you start this stuff. Anything you do on one side, where you favor one side over the other, you're going to make one side dominant. You just are. There has never in the history of the world and of people been anyone who did anything on one side of the body all the time that didn't end up creating an imbalance. Any physio will tell you this. So you lie on your back, or you sit up with good form, or you stand up, which, is the latter stages of the core breath in the way we do it. We start lying down, supine, then we're sitting up, and then we do the standing ones. And you do the core breath for all your exercises. The problem is this exercise doesn't tone your stomach muscles. You're just breathing. I know they're going for a weird vacuum sort of exercise because they're holding it for a count of 10. Right? So they go, tuck it in and squeeze, squeeze, squeeze. That doesn't tone anything. You're breathing. That's not a toning exercise. Also, and I spoke about this before, or at least I think I probably spoke about this before, the vacuum exercise is really not that great an exercise when it comes to starting your postpartum recovery. I don't mind it as an exercise. There's nothing fundamentally wrong with it as an exercise. I don't want anyone getting offended saying I do it all the time. Yeah, it's a wonderful exercise if you know what you're doing and everything is working the way it should. But you need to do a lot more than just the vacuum exercise. And like I said, it's just a really weird exercise to suggest people start to do. And again, you're lying on your side. Everything about this is just bad. Ways to ease back pain. Right? These practical tips may help to relieve an aching back. While feeding your baby, sit with your back well supported and straight. Put a small pillow or cushion behind your waist to support your lower back. Yeah, all that sort of stuff is fine. But you're not teaching people anything. Other than keeping your back straight. An awful lot. Most of the ways to ease back pain seems to focus around not bending your back and bringing baby higher up. So whilst feeding your baby, sit with your back supported, kneel or squat. Do not bend your back to do tasks that are near the floor, such as picking up toys or bathing your baby. Change the nappy on a raised surface. You could kneel on the floor next to sofa bed, blah, blah, blah. Keep your back straight and then bend your knees when lifting. Keep your back straight when you push your pram or buggy or carry your baby in a well-fitting sling. Yeah. Doesn't fix anything, any of these things. Right? That is the problem. I also really like it when people give advice such as, yeah, just stand up straight. Right? And then you see this a lot with moms. You see a lot of physios give this advice. I just don't put the baby on your hip when you're cooking. Oh, really? What am I going to do? Right? That's where the toddler goes. That's where the baby goes. Everybody knows that is how you hold a kid. If the child needs to be held, you can't do that with perfect posture. The exercises you're giving people and the advice you give people has to be practical advice, not dreamland advice. So the NHS's job is, or at least the website, it'd be so easy to add a couple of videos into this. A couple of I'll tell you what, if the NHS is listening, add some HPMB videos. Just exercises, just take them from the YouTube channel. You don't need to pay me, I don't give a hoot whether you credit me or not. You really don't need to. Most of them don't have like a logo in it, just link to them, just take them all and say, this is what you need to do. Because it's driving me absolutely up the wall. And please just change your website. It's embarrassing to say things like the separation between your stomach muscles will usually go back to normal by the time your baby is 8 weeks old, when all the evidence, and again, I have linked to the study before, I will do it again because that's what I do when I say that there's a study. I'll link to the study. All the evidence says that is not the case. So we have to move away from that idea. What is the blog post again that I read? Something along the line of how common is diastasis recti. I wrote about this such a long time ago now. It's one of the earliest blogs on the 2019. There we are. 60% of all women have diastasis. There you go. The study is linked in the thing. That was a study by, the British Journal of Sports Medicine. 12 months after postpartum. By Joram Bak and Sperstad. See, a good study. I link to good studies when I come up with stuff. That's what I link to. Anyways, I'm going to call the podcast there. Like I said, my voice is breaking up. I've got a couple of tired dogs and everyone is just being a pain in the bum. A nice short one is a new bit of music. Peter at healthypostnatalbody.com. I'm doing interviews again next week. I had one planned for this week that was going to come out, but the lady couldn't make it. So we are hoping to reschedule that one. I'm not sure what next week's is about yet. But I'll sort it out. Don't worry. There will be something. Let me have a look. I'm checking my phone as I do this. No. Might be a bit late. To get that in next week, I'm doing a podcast with Helen. Baby massage is what we're talking about next week. Baby massage. Yes, indeed. See, you never thought that I would do an episode on this, and yet here we are, right? By popular demand, right? So I've got a specialist coming in for that. I'm hoping to get that one done in time for, if I'm really, really quick in the turnover, I can get that out next week. Anyways, here's a new bit of music. Remember, healthypostnatalbody.com is free for 3 months. Just tell everybody you know, right? Because, why not? It's free. There's nothing to lose. Cancel on day one. I always say this. You sign up, you cancel. You still get 3 months free. I genuinely don't mind. You have a tremendous week, and I'll catch up with you guys next week. Right? Cheers. Bye now.
The flowers bloom in springtime, the leaves fly in the fall, but we have one another through the changes of them all. These unspoken wonders, these stories left to tell, there can't be any other who loves me quite as well.
If we should ever falter, should we ever hang by a string, remember we had each other through all the seasons, through everything. These unspoken wonders, these stories left to tell, there can't be any other who loves me quite as well.